Hello and welcome to another Turnstile Tours virtual program. I'm Stephen DW coming to you from Flushing, Queens. And once again, we're talking about the waterfront. Looks like we've got folks chiming in from all over the place, from the UK and Brooklyn and Massachusetts. And we're thrilled to have you with us today as we look at New York City from the waterfront. So while we're waiting for Andrew to get set up on the boat, I understand he's got Captain Chris with him. And some of you who may have taken tours of the New York waterfront from boats before may have done the architectural tours and heard all about how the waterfront has been built up over the last 60 years. But if you've seen any of our programs in the past, you know that we spend a lot of time talking about what the waterfront used to be, particularly with interests in shipping and military. And so that's a lot of what we're going to look at today are the remnants, the ghosts, and sort of the callbacks to the shipping history of New York's waterfront. A lot of the space that we're going to look at, and let's actually take a look at that space here as I bring up my slides. When we talk about the harbor, we don't often refer to the lower bay so much as the upper bay. And today we're going even further up, and we're just doing this section right here. So from up around 23rd Street, where Classic Harbor Lines keeps their vessels, down to the Statue of Liberty. And so we'll be looking at these piers, mostly on the Manhattan side, though as the sun allows or requires, we'll see a little bit of the New Jersey side. There's still some great infrastructure over there to look at. And a lot of what happened between these two sides of the river was shuttling cargo and people between Manhattan and the rest of the country. So here we have another look at, this is 1932. You can see a lot more ships and vessels in the harbor at that time. A lot of them, it looks like down here, we've got a barge in tow, possibly two barges in tow. A lot of those barges were carrying freight cars, which we talked about in our intermodal programs. And you'll see that a lot of this waterfront has changed pretty dramatically. We don't have piers in this area anymore. Now we have skyscrapers. But again, we're going to start up here at a bit of a bend in the island at 23rd Street. It sounds like Andrew is joining us. So let's, I'll stop here and we can say hello to Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Stefan. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
All right, great. So we're just, we're about to pull out here. I'm going to flip my camera around so you can see the bow. So there's our view. So we're just facing Chelsea Piers right here, and we're aboard the beautiful Manhattan 2, which is of Classic Harbor Line. We'll take a look over here at the sister ship, which is the Manhattan 1. So this is a slightly larger version. And a little bit later on, we'll get to talk to some of the crew and learn a little bit more about the boat and the company. One thing that's really cool about these boats is that Classic Harbor Line is a owner, operator, builder of these boats. So they actually build them up at Scarano Boatyard, which is in Albany. So we're just going to be backing out here into the Hudson in just a second. And we're going to make our way south, and it's going to get a lot colder than it is right now. So for those of you who haven't been on our harbor programs before, this is the fourth one, or the third one that we've done. The other two were on NYC Ferry, and they were of there we go.
Testing the sound dampening on Zoom here. That was pretty impressive.
That's right. So we've done them of the Astoria route of the NYC Ferry, which is basically the full length of the East River, and then we did the South Brooklyn route. So now we're going to see a little bit of the Hudson. So Cindy's done one of these as sort of the field camera person. Doug has done one. Now I've done one. This is definitely the coldest of the 3 days. So I think you're up next, Stefan, for this duty.
I look forward to it. I'll have to get myself prepared.
Yeah.
I want to briefly just note that you're in a very significant piece of water here. When people think about one of the most popular aspects of the New York waterfront history, of course, is anything relating to the Titanic. People love stories about the Titanic. And you're coming around Pier 59, which is where the Titanic would have moored. That'll be coming into view in just a second here. So really significant place. And as I recall, there's some great photography in those buildings. There are Chelsea Piers, great event center and sports complex, also where a lot of the crime shows about New York are filmed, the names of which are escaping me offhand. But
yeah, Law and Order for a long time was filmed at the Chelsea stages. Yeah, but yeah, like that image that you showed a few minutes ago, you can see all of the piers and all the traffic in the Hudson River, and that of course included all of these ocean liners, and it was sort of this stretch, from about 14th Street up to about 50th Street, where some of the major ocean liner piers were. Now we can see a little bit. We're going to be heading away from it, but that's the giant alien spaceship that crash landed on the west side of Manhattan, known as Hudson Yards, right there.
And I want to pick up where you're talking about with the giant ocean liners. The story of the waterfront of New York, of course, starts on the East River. And as the ships got larger, there just wasn't room for them on the East River. And that's a big piece of what brought them around to the Hudson. And as they continued to get larger, they kept moving further up the Hudson to find more space. And at one point, the city wanted to build the piers further out into the river to make more space for these increasingly large vessels. And at some point, the federal government put their foot down and said, no, you can't build further out beyond this line. And you'll see there's a real dramatic line that the piers all stop at. That's federally mandated pierhead. Yep. And so unfortunately, there wasn't room to put the ships there because we had already built enough landfill that we just didn't have the water available. In fact, there was a road called 13th Avenue that ran over that landfill from the Gansevoort Peninsula, which we'll see in a little bit, to about this spot here. And they removed that landfill, upsetting people who had things on it, so that they could fit these ships, these large vessels, in at this location.
So basically, cruise ships just got too long for the distance that was available from the bulkhead out to the pier head. I love this one right here. So maybe we can talk a little bit about this. Pier 57. This is sort of from the very twilight of the cruise ship era, built in the early 1950s and dubbed the Super Pier. And here you can see on it, it still has the sign for the Department of Marine and Aviation of the City of New York. But this
one of many attempts to sort of get the organization of the piers in some kind of order. But yeah, gorgeous sort of Art Deco feel, but from I believe 1954. That's Emil Prager who designed this. And he did some work in World War II, didn't he?
It's escaping me the projects he worked on off the top of my head, but
it's like a similar structure around the Normandy, the invasion of Normandy.
Right. Well, if we look here, speaking of architecture, this right here, this is the old Pier 55, which is now known as the Little Island, and you can see these sort of flower-shaped concrete piles that form this sort of undulating landscape. You were talking before about the battles over, building on the piers. This was a long legal battle over supposed environmental concerns over building this, but this was largely financed by Barry Diller, whose company headquarters are basically across the street from it. But now it's complete and open to the public. We're going to zoom by a lot of really interesting stuff right here, but
this is a very fast section. There goes.
We're coming by here the 343, which is one of the modern fire boats of the FDNY, which is named after the number of members of the FDNY who were killed on September 11th. So this is where it's docked right here, and then we can also see the Standard Hotel and the new Whitney Museum, because just beyond where we see along the shore is what's been a major sort of economic real estate speculation engine, which is the High Line, which runs just a couple of blocks in from the water. And so we've seen a huge boom in real estate and new construction all along that High Line corridor.
Now, something that we can't see, but you might be able to. Can you see if have they built that that sculpture they're planning for Gainsborough Peninsula that was passing by us right now? There's a planned sculpture that's in the outline of a warehouse of a pier shed.
I cannot quite see it.
Yeah, it would be back by the Whitney. So
Right.
That was the location.
Yeah, I can see. I can see basically the yeah, just to the left of the Whitney, which is sort of the white building. It has sort of it's like a bunch of different shapes piled on top of each other, and then behind it are those two large glass window curtain walls of the Standard Hotel. But
Yeah.
I can see sort of the rough shoreline there of the old pier where that sculpture is going to be built.
Yeah, so let's get a look at the shoreline that you're passing by here. So this area, it gets a little quiet for a few moments, but this, we're looking at the village. This was where longshoremen lived, even into Jane Jacobs' time in the 60s. There were still a lot of longshoremen living in the neighborhood. Of course, they ultimately ended up following the shipping as these piers closed down and departed. But the sculptures we're talking about with the Whitney Museum, there was a famous sculpture, and we will put the link up for this, with the Whitney Museum, a sculptor named Gordon Matta Clark cut a hole in one of the old piers and called it, I believe, Day's End. And of course, that pier is long gone, but it was a real icon of art at the time. And so this new sculpture that is outlining the space that pier inhabited is also called Day's End. And it's David Hammond's sculpture. And so that's going to bring that back in reference.
Yeah, Cindy and I got to see the little exhibit that was about that in the Whitney a couple of months ago. I mean, one thing we can see though, what we can see now as we go by these piers is you can really see how the surviving piers have been repurposed for recreation. There really is no remnant of working waterfront, with the exception, if you want to count, the firehouse. And then we do have one cruise ship terminal further up. But that's basically it for the Hudson River waterfront, which is a pretty stark contrast. The Brooklyn waterfront looks, positively booming when compared to the Hudson River waterfront when we talk about, marine activity and traffic and industrial activity.
Well, here we are at Pier 40, and we can see some of the old gear, the house gear, those structures above the building, and which would help longshoremen to get cargo off ships and into the warehouse. This Pier 40 is a late addition to the waterfront, part of trying to respond to the competition from trucking and also to address the congestion along the west side and getting trucks into the piers and off the piers. So there's, you can see some cars up there on the roof.
Yeah, so speaking of recreation, this is now a parking lot, and then there's soccer fields inside, but then there's also some of the other, harbor cruise companies are based out of here. And then there's a great environmental project. Oh, absolutely. Speaking of which, I just wanted to, I don't know if people can see, but so there are two barges that are moored right off Pier 40. I don't know if you can make out, Stefan.
Yeah, them out. They're on the right of the building. So you can see the building is white with red writing that's going to come into view in just a moment in response to the pandemic. And there are a couple of barges in front of that.
And I'm just wondering if you can make out, there's a series of cylinders that are on that barge, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, because we're going to talk about why the piers have disappeared. But I do want to talk about the environmental organization that's in Pier 40. But before we do that, you're going to get a great view of this right here.
Yeah, so this is a ventilation shaft for the Holland Tunnel, 1927, first connection for cars that you could drive from Manhattan to New Jersey. And I think we've got a great image of inside. There we go.
So this is how the police used to patrol the Holland Tunnel, with what they called the catwalk car. So it was a skinny little vehicle that would drive. If you've ever wondered what that little catwalk is when you're driving through the Holland Tunnel, this is what they used it for.
Also,
pretty
next to
amazing.
the Holland Tunnel, let's go to the next slide here, or the one right close to it. A significant thing you can't see, but really changes the water here is this is a major outlet for fresh water from Manhattan. Here we are looking at the Vla Map, and this is a map that is still referred to anytime you dig in Manhattan. This shows where all the water, the natural water sources are in Manhattan, and you can see the in the blue section sort of at the center of this map is the collect pond, and running up and right from that is a green area, which was a stream outlet from the collect pond, and that still runs today, coming out here at the Holland Tunnel.
Wow, it's amazing how, we think that we've sort of overcome topography in New York City, but we really haven't. And that map is so remarkable because it shows, how much the island has grown, and that's 1865. So it's still changed. It's changed substantially since then. But even that is a tremendous change. We're coming up here. Again, speaking of recreation, we're getting towards the end of Manhattan. But here we can see some historic ships. So we have the Lilac. And then this is this fireboat that's more proximate, that's closer to us. I actually am not sure what boat that is. Do you know, Stefan?
I am not sure. There's a good chance.
Is it the McKean or the Al Smith?
My suspicion is it's the Alfred E. Smith. Alfred E. Smith is owned by the same people who own this schooner that's coming up here on the right. That's the Sherman Zwicker. That's by a company that's called, it used to be called Summeroff. They're now called Crew, and they maintain and operate historic vessels as restaurants. So not the frying pan, but we have the Sherman Zwicker that we're looking at here. This is an old Grand Banks fishing vessel built in 1942. Also Pilot, which has been over in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and I understand they have the Alfred E. Smith fireboat as well.
The Alfred, I'll just add the Alfred E. Smith spent a lot of its retirement years moored at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So we used to go and see it all the time. And then it got bought along with the McKean about 5 or 6 years ago.
I just want to clarify one question. We've been racing down the water here at quite a clip. Have we gone through the piece of water where the airplane landed some years ago?
So we're basically in that vicinity. So it essentially crashed north of us. I believe it was right around 23rd Street. I could be mistaken. What I do know, though, is that it drifted into the area of North Cove Marina, which we're going to be coming up to in just a second. So it's basically, this stretch of the lower Hudson where the miracle on the Hudson took place. Obviously, it was a harrowing event, but a funny story about that is Cindy was having a meeting with our accountant, whose office is in the Empire State Building. And while they're in the meeting, the plane, the plane crashed, but no one in the office bothered to tell them. Like, while everybody else in the office was like gathered around the windows watching this all happen, they missed it because they were having a meeting with the accountant.
We had a follow-up question from Irene about the Holland Tunnel. Do you know what sort of police activities would use that little cart in the Holland Tunnel?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe, I don't know. You obviously couldn't stop someone for speeding, but if motorists, I guess, needed assistance, they were there. So they, because they had to patrol it going back and forth to like make sure it was clear and there weren't disabled vehicles and stuff. And so that little catwalk car made it easier for them to go back and forth.
Nope. I don't know, because that's just an opportunity to find out. So we'll get that for you, Irene. And here we are at North Cove.
Yep. So this is the North Cove Marina right here and the World Financial Center. And so behind it, we can see One World Trade Center and the other additional buildings of the new World Trade Center complex. And so basically, as Stefan was talking about landfill, this whole area here, Battery Park City, is landfill from excavation for the original
let's take a look
Twin
at that
Towers.
slide here. We've got a great slide of the World Trade Center and the landfill that came out of it so back in the 80s. There we go. Look at that. So that was all piers and moorage, and it became a big piece of landfill.
Yeah, so they had to dig deep. They excavated a huge amount of land to build those towers, and of course all of the other buildings that were part of the original World Trade Center complex. I saw someone mention in the chat the Freedom Tower, which is the not the official name. That was the original name that was eventually abandoned for its official name, which is One World Trade Center. But yeah, so all this, I wish we could see it better. I just got a little glimpse of the Broadway Chambers building, which is one of my favorite buildings, designed by architect Cass Gilbert.
Oh, and here you're at Rector Place. That little space between the buildings on the right side there, that's where Rector Street ends, and one of my favorite places in the waterfront, where the Henry Eckford in 1825 in April set off with two barges in tow, the first time a steamboat took barges in tow, and a key link in making the Erie Canal possible.
And speaking of the waterfront history, we sort of have an homage to that on the top of these two buildings. If you look on the left, you can see this green structure that's meant to resemble a pilot house. And the one on the right that's white is meant to resemble a lighthouse. So sort of a nod to the maritime history of this area. But as we saw in that photo you showed, Stefan, that aerial view, that big open space, maybe we can show the picture of one of the really amazing things that happens in that space.
The art project.
Before they constructed all these buildings.
I was just thinking so we're going to look at the wheat field in just a moment. I think of the North River Cove as a great place for events like visiting vessels. We had Hokulea, the great circumnavigating Polynesian ship, but we also have great art events, and that goes right back to the beginnings of Battery Park City with Agnes Dennis and Wheatfield.
Yeah, so the title of the artwork was Wheatfield, A Confrontation. And in the spring of 1982, she planted this whole field of wheat, and it grew, and then she harvested it, and it was gone. So it was this very ephemeral project. But if we go to the next photo, you can see kind of what it looked like in situ. Because you can see, really amazing.
We also, if we can, we'll step out of the photos for just a moment and come back to them. We had a question about how deep the Hudson is. Of course, that changes not just with the 5 to 6 foot change of tide, but also where you are in the Hudson. They do keep the channel pretty consistently deep, but most of your depths are in the between 40 and 60 foot range as you go in the Hudson there. You can see,
and we're coming out now. We're coming out now into the upper bay, and many parts of this upper bay, if left to their own devices, would be much shallower than they are. And there are a lot of shoals and things in here. It's a wonderful, beautiful bay, but it's actually not terribly deep by modern standards naturally, because the Hudson River, as we look up here, it's a conveyor belt of silt coming off the Adirondacks, and it just dumps it all in here. So there is a significant amount of dredging that needs to be done to allow modern ships to come in here and to keep channels open.
We're bringing back all kinds of memories folks have had about the cruise ships. Of course, it was all the different liners that came in there, and whether it's the United States or the France, and this has been a real got a great view there of those piers going out. And of course, we still have cruise ships coming in at Pier 92 and Pier 93. And that area was also cut into the island, but they didn't cut landfill. Pier 92 and Pier 93, where the cruise ships come in today, that they actually cut into the basalt there. That's we took away original Manhattan land to make space for them.
If people aren't exactly sure where that is, that's just a little bit north of the Intrepid.
You're breaking up a lot there, Andrew.
Okay. I
think it may be the wind.
Okay. I'll try and get a little bit of cover here. How's that?
That's much better.
Okay. I was showing you a little bit of the New Jersey waterfront there. Yeah, if people don't know exactly where Pier 92, Pier 94 are, it's just a little bit north of the Intrepid. And as a rule of thumb, roughly speaking, if you're wondering where the piers are, once you get into the numbered streets in Manhattan, you just add 40 to them, basically.
Add 40 to the street and you get the pier number.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the Hudson, because there are a whole other set of pier numbers for the East River in Brooklyn.
Correct.
It's definitely a special code. So this is a great view looking up the East River. You can see some of the Brooklyn Bridge there and the Staten Island Ferry and Battery Park. And
we're gonna loop around in a few minutes. So we'll get another view of Lower Manhattan, and then we're gonna. But first we're going to go past Ellis Island and the statue. You might not be able to hear me so well, but I do want to give you a view of Ellis.
Absolutely. That's a great view of Ellis Island there. And of course, all of the area behind Ellis Island and behind the Statue of Liberty, those were rail yards. And we've got a great aerial photo of Ellis Island. Well, it's of the rail yards, but we can see Ellis Island in that. There we go. The Tom Flagg collection. So there in the lower right, you see Ellis Island, and then working our way up the shore. All the striations in the photo are railroad tracks coming into the piers, and you can see just above, right about where the cursor is now, that's the old Central Railroad of New Jersey a train station, the Communipaw terminal. And then you have Morris Basin, where the Morris Canal came in. We did a program on the Morris Canal a little while back. And that was also the Lehigh Valley Railroad had their yards in there. They actually bought the Morris Canal so they could get access to that property in part. Those strange looking sort of pyramid structures just above Morris Canal are floating grain terminals. People often forget that New York Harbor was a major center of grain shipping. And of course, we had, that was where the Pennsylvania Railroad had a station just at the top edge of the image there. That was the Exchange Place station. We've got a photo of that a couple of slides back.
And speaking of barges, we are having a barge, tugging barge come by us right now.
Oh, well, maybe we should go to you. Yes, great. Let's see, do you have any sense of what's on that barge? Looks like a hopper barge, not a Weeks barge, so I'm guessing that's not for the Gowanus.
Right, it looks empty. You know, it could be for carrying gravel or some kind of aggregate.
Of course, a lot of the barge activity on the east side of the harbor near where you are is for the Superfund cleanup of the Gowanus Canal. So there's some barges full of toxic sludge over by Brooklyn right now.
Yeah, but there's a lot of barge traffic that goes up and down the Hudson River, and a lot of it is for carrying gasoline and especially oil. So this is
and gravel. There's a lot of gravel. The gravel is a very important component in all the construction with the concrete, poured concrete construction. And of course, there's a great gravel terminal over at the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
And if we were, and if we were to go kind of sort of directly behind Ellis Island, we would find Caven Point, which is where the Army Corps of Engineers is based. And there's also a Coast Guard base, and that's where the icebreaker that breaks up the ice on the Hudson River so they can keep those shipping lanes open especially for that home heating oil is based. So that's the Sturgeon Bay. If you go back through our library of programs, we did one with a former crew member of the Sturgeon Bay talking about their ice breaking mission.
That was a great program. Well, talking about Caven Point, that's also very close to Black Tom Island, which hasn't been an island for a long time, but a very important place we're coming close to. So just on the other side of the Statue of Liberty, off there in the clouds, God, it takes me back to that novel, The Winter's Tale, talking about the cloud wall over Bayonne. So let's peer through those clouds and take a look at a photo we have of relating to Black Tom. This is in the lead up to World War I, and I guess we have the punchline, the silver punchline that it is here. In the lead up to World War I, a lot of material came through New York to World War I, to the fighting over in Europe, and there was so much traffic going through the port of New York that in 1917 there was a traffic jam of train cars that stretched all the way to Chicago. So the image we saw a moment ago was from a really unfortunate incident that occurred in July of, I believe it was 1917, when fires were set. They later determined it was by German saboteurs who set fires in the rail yards behind the Statue of Liberty at Black Tom Island. And the fires did what they were intended to. They caught on the munitions that were stored there. A massive explosion, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, and shattered windows as far north as Times Square was felt as far away as Maryland. Only 4 people died, but the damage it did was considerable.
Yeah, and that damage, can you hear me okay, Stefan?
Yeah, great.
Sorry, it just got considerably more windy, but that damage included significant damage to the Statue of Liberty, which we can see here. And it's actually the reason why you can't go into the torch. People often say like, oh, I went in the torch when I was a kid. I'm sorry that people may be misremembering, because the torch has been closed since that explosion in during World War I.
And it's also a very narrow passage by a steep ladder. So
yes, that's right. But yeah, and what's interesting too about Black Tom Island and that explosion is that the munitions industry was huge, especially in New Jersey, and so there were a number of really catastrophic and deadly accidents, all in the area of industrial New Jersey. Basically to the west of us, places like Perth Amboy and Lyndhurst had major munitions disasters during World War I. So it was very treacherous work, and work largely done by women as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was July 30, 1916. My apologies, I just checked my notes on that. Really, we don't talk that much about New Jersey. I think it's easy to, we try to ignore it in New York, and so we don't know about these industrial accidents. And it's definitely worth paying attention to. It's such a vital link in our history and in our operations. Mary Grimes wanted to know if we ever see whales or seals in New York Harbor. Quite recently, there was a really dramatic photo taken by one of the companies that helps professional photographers do their work in New York Harbor, of a whale breaching right in front of the Statue of Liberty. So yes, there are definitely whales and seals. In fact, we're looking at the Verrazano Narrows. It's like now.
Yep. But we had a humpback whale this summer. A couple summers ago, there was a sperm whale that was found in the harbor. Not alive, unfortunately, but
not an encouraging term.
But yeah, so we do get periodic whales that will come up into the Narrows, and seals are regular visitors. So actually what you can do is there are actually seal watches that you can do. They like to gather actually on the islands just south of the Verrazano, on the Swinburne Island and Hoffman Island.
Yeah.
But they'll go all the way up the East River. They're seals that like to hop out on the beach right by Gracie Mansion. So they're all over the place. This summer, Cindy and I actually went on a whale watch. We had to go almost to Atlantic City. We went really far on that boat, but we did find a couple humpback whales. It was really, really amazing. It was supposed to be a 3.5 hour cruise. I think it was 5.5 hours. They really wanted to show us a
Oh,
whale.
wow.
But yeah, but I know we had some more questions about the Statue of Liberty, so I do want to show it again now that I'm on the less windy side.
We also have a question from Debbie Becker asking if it's a high tide, and according to my app, yes, it's high tide at Gowanus Bay right now. Although
Yep.
At this particular phase of the moon, it's a fairly moderate high tide.
Yeah, but I wanted to share a little bit about the Statue of Liberty because we talked about this on a prior program, but I want you to take a look at the pedestal, especially the lower part of the pedestal. When the decision was made to, give this statue as a gift to the United States, it was the responsibility of the United States government to find a place to put it and to build the pedestal. And so when they decided they wanted to put it in New York Harbor, they need to find a spot. And what they chose is actually it's built on top of an old fort, Fort Wood. So you can sort of make out that lower casemate structure, which is actually an old star fort from the early 19th century. So it was no longer being used. Although interestingly, it was reactivated as a fort during World War I. So there were barracks on the island and all sorts of military personnel on the islands during the war, but the statue had been built there. So that's kind of how the Statue of Liberty arrived in this location. It was already federally owned land that they could pop that pedestal onto. And then, of course, it was dedicated in 1886. They also just opened a new visitor center, which is on the back side of the island. You can sort of see it on the right-hand side, which actually has inside it the original torch because the torch was replaced.
And so there's Ellis Island again. Wow, did Ellis Island play a role in the war as well?
Yeah, so a couple of things. World War I with Ellis Island. For one, it was used for interning German nationals. German nationals many of whom were mariners who just happened to be, in the harbor on ships when war was declared in April 1917. Those German ships were seized by the American government. Many of them were turned into troop ships, and the sailors were interned on Ellis Island and eventually repatriated. In some cases, they weren't mariners; they were just American residents who happened to be German citizens who were interned there. The other thing that happened is when the Black Tom Island explosion happened, it almost destroyed the main hall on Ellis Island. That the registry building, as it was called, with those 4 cupolas on top of it, and actually the ceiling collapsed as a result of that explosion. Luckily, it happened late at night, so there aren't too many people inside. But there were immigrants in there, and their first experience in the United States is almost getting blown up. But what they did after that in 1918 was replace the ceiling with the ceiling you can see today, which is the beautiful Guastavino vaulted ceiling, which is far more resilient. And even though the building was abandoned for several decades before they opened it as a museum in a national park, when they went in there to take a look at the ceiling, there were only a handful of tiles that were out of place. It was such an amazing piece of engineering when they replaced that ceiling with the Guastavino style. If you're not familiar with Rafael Guastavino, he was a Spanish immigrant who introduced this type of very, very thin tile vaulting. That was sort of a revolutionary technique, and it's a technique for building ceilings that we cannot replicate today. So once the company went out of business in 1960, kind of the art form was lost. But you can see about 250 examples of those ceilings in New York City, including in Ellis Island.
Well, we can barely make out the island at this point, which suggests that you're close to Governor's Island and also Castle Clinton and Manhattan.
Yeah, so I'm going to come around the other side of the boat, and we're very close to Castle Clinton. Thank you for reminding me, or to Castle Williams, excuse me.
Not at all.
Yeah, so here we can see Governor's Island, excuse me. And this is another one of the forts. So this one was built just before the War of 1812, Castle Williams, and a very different design, this multi-tiered casemated guns. And you can still make out a sort of Civil War era cannon just poking out over the
All right, so you're pretty frozen right now.
top. So there were the cross.
Back now. Okay.
Oh, okay.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so yeah, so these forts, this is Castle Williams, and then over in Lower Manhattan, where you can maybe see an American flag waving.
Well, let me help folks because find it there. If you see a One World Trade Center, just the bottom and right, there's a dark splotch on the shoreline, and that's Castle Clinton there in the tree.
So Castle Clinton here. I'm going to swing around. Castle Williams there, and then way out in the distance, Fort Wood and the Statue of Liberty. They would have created crossing fire in order to prevent ships from entering into the East River, where we're headed now, or going up the Hudson River. So there was sort of this network of fortifications that guarded the harbor. But today, for a long time, Governor's Island was an Army base up until 1966, when it was transferred to the Coast Guard, who had it for about 30 years. And now it's owned by the city.
And we're going to take a quick look at what it looked like when it was a little more militarized.
So you can see that had its own railroad and this huge network of supply depots, training grounds on the island, used very extensively in World War I. By the time of World War II, it was used less and less. Back
to you, we've got another example of a feature we've seen before. That is another tunnel ventilation shaft.
Yep, for the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And then behind it, we can see those container cranes of the Red Hook Container Terminal. We actually have a boat that looks like
Oh yeah, no, I see that. So it looks like
being unloaded there in the Buttermilk Channel.
Yeah, no, they've got the.
It's the Seaboard. If I'm not mistaken, this is a ship that goes to the Caribbean.
That's my understanding. Yeah,
yeah. So like
from there,
Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But yeah, we're going to take a little jaunt up the East River here.
They'll bring containers over from the big container ports in New Jersey, and as lighterage to bring them over. But yeah, now we're looking at Brooklyn, and we've got the old Brooklyn waterfront that we're looking at. We've covered in a number of programs with Brooklyn Heights in front of us.
Yeah, and I can't really see the chat. Also, my fingers are frozen, so I can't really manipulate my screen. But do we have any questions from the audience?
Oh, just Cindy looking for questions from the audience. See, Paula says she's been to Governor's Island a couple times and love it. If we did a future tour on the history of the island, I would love that too, Paula. I love that idea.
Yeah, and we have someone who reached out to us who's was an officer on Governor's Island with the Coast Guard back in the 1970s and 80s, and so we're working with them to see if they want to come on and do a program.
My favorite Coast Guard trivia is, as I understand it, the Smothers brothers were born on Governor's Island.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
This is what I'm told. I haven't fact-checked that, so buyer beware.
Another thing I have not totally fact-checked, but someone at the Coast Guard told me was that by 1996, at the time that they shut down Governor's Island, operating Governor's Island consumed half of the Coast Guard's entire budget.
Islands are expensive.
So yeah, we get a nice view there of the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge behind it, and that giant tower, and that dwarfs everything in Chinatown. But now we're going to swing around Lower Manhattan here. And so we can see a mix of skyscrapers, some of which are newer, some of which, are some of the older skyscrapers in the city.
Absolutely.
But we can also get a little view of the South Street Seaport.
Yeah, we've talked about these in several programs, but we can just make out some of the South Street Seaport. And I believe that buoy might be Diamond Reef that you're passing just now.
Yeah. Diamond Reef, which I believe it was the USS Wisconsin, struck it and got stuck on it in the 1950s. We had a question about how long did it take to build the Brooklyn Bridge? Yeah, so you talked before about how the Holland Tunnel was the first vehicular crossing of the Hudson in New York. The Brooklyn Bridge is the first crossing of the East River, and they started building it in 1869 and completed it in 1883. So it took 14 years to build. During that time, during the construction, the designer, John Roebling, was killed, and his son, Washington Roebling, was basically incapacitated for the rest of his life as a result of the construction and the building of the caissons. So basically these big underwater boxes they used to excavate the bed of the East River. And going down in there and coming back out, you would get what they called caisson disease, later called decompression sickness, or what we know today as the bends. And so he got severe nitrogen poisoning in his blood. And that's why famously his wife, Emily Roebling, had to assist on site with the construction while Washington was bedridden.
We have a memory from Daphne, who worked at that beautiful wedding cake 120 Wall Street building.
Yeah. So we just saw that a second ago. So yeah, older skyscraper design with the 1916 zoning resolution that allowed you to build that sort of step back design, because it was meant so that there wouldn't be so much shadow cast onto the street below.
Got the Staten Island Ferry Terminal there at Whitehall Street in the foreground, with the U.S. Coast Guard building to its left, and a lot of newer skyscrapers along the waterfront. And most of these most of these are dating to the late 60s, early 70s.
How are we doing on time, by the way, Stefan?
Oh, we are just 10 minutes to the hour here.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so a lot of really great monuments here in Battery Park. We did a whole program about the monuments of Battery Park, but if you missed that, here we're just coming right past something called the East Coast Memorial, which is dedicated to Americans who were killed in defense of the coastal United States in World War II.
And I know in just a moment we're going to see Castle Clinton much closer, but let's take a quick look at, we've got an image of that, historical image of Castle Clinton.
Yeah, Castle Clinton's kind of obscured by this white structure here, which is the security checkpoint for getting on the Ellis Island and Liberty Island ferries.
All the more reason to look at the slide then.
Yeah, but you can see the flag behind it.
There it is in its time that it was the aquarium.
Yeah. Do you have a sec? So I thought I might step inside to warm up for a second, but we also, can you take this opportunity to talk with Sarah from Classic Harbor Line? So maybe you can show us a little bit about the boat.
Oh, I'm glad you're warming up.
Okay.
To kind of pan wide for the next.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Can you hear us? Okay, Stefan?
Yep, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Excellent. Should I talk a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about the boat. Manhattan 2. So this is the larger member of the Classic Harbor Line fleet here in New York City. This boat was completed in 2016. It was built at the Toronto Boat Yard up in Albany, New York, which is where all of our boats were designed and built. It's a team of two brothers, really, John Serrano and Rick Serrano. And they build vessels for us with other operators too, all over close to the East Coast. And this boat, along with her sister, Little Manhattan, are you guys come on through. They're inspired by the commuter yachts of the 1920s. I don't know if you guys covered them already, but the commuter yachts were basically boats that you would see belonging to the ultra rich here in the New York area, even specifically. It was the first application of the gas combustion engine on a boat, and that design was typically long, skinny, narrow boats, very fast, and typically they were using it to commute in and beat traffic. Traffic was awful in the 20s, so they went to the water, and commuter boats kind of shaped like this, but plumbed out, made for inland waters, is is the design you typically would see. None of them really lasted. There's not really clear yachts around today because they were gas engines. Of course, it's the diesel application, so we'll be super with. But there are some great photos of the Skyport Marine on the East River from the 20s and 30s, full of this sort of design. They come in there and then take their carriages or their cars down to Wall Street area where of course they were. And the rest of our fleet mostly sailed 1850s, 1890s style, but we're certainly interested in sort of the heritage of boating in this area. We don't really build with new design in mind. We kind of look to history and find a design that we like and works for sightseeing and entertaining in this area. So that's what we had to it. You can see she's got some big glass windows. They all slide open, great for viewing the city and taking in the sights, seeing the architecture.
So the boats look old, but they're very new.
Yeah, they're very new. Yeah. The Little Manhattan that this is based on, she's only 80 feet. She was designed in 2006. So this was just 10 years later. And she's only 20 feet longer, but she's got just so much more sort of space that she can really, accommodate guests with. Down below is very simple design, just some restrooms and our kitchen. I don't know if I'm going to go down there.
Yeah.
But and of course the engine room. But really, this is what people are enjoying the space. If you'd like, you can come on up to the wheelhouse and take a look.
Sure. I'm just gonna plug in so we can hear a little better.
Sure. Hey guys, come up and just get a view from up here.
All right, we're gonna take a peek, folks. Can you hear me okay, Stefan?
Yep, this is much better. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, what a view. It's a great view looking up the river, and it's some of the instrument panel in there as well. Our captain.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, we're gonna head back outside for our last little bit. But yeah, there's such beautiful boats and a little bit of background. We've had the opportunity to work with Classic Harbor Line now for 7 years, I guess. So I always do a bunch of tours in normal times. This has been so nice. Obviously 2020, I did not get to give any boat tours, but it's nice to be back on board and see the whole team. But normally what we do is tours during Fleet Week. So we go out and take a look at all the ships visiting for Fleet Week New York in May. All right, so I'm going to step back outside for our last little stretch here.
And as you're heading outside, we had a question from Janet, a topic that was covered a little bit in Sarah's talk, but was a little muffled, asking about commuter boats, if they're still in service. Of the type that Sarah was talking about, they're not in service anymore. They were mostly gasoline powered, which is boats eat a lot of gasoline, or the diesel powered boats are more what are affordable right now. And the people I know of who commute by boat are people commuting for pleasure in kayaks. It's possible that there are people commuting by power vessel. I am not aware of them at this time.
And then, of course, we have the ferry system. So
absolutely. But private vessels a little bit less so. Ellen Spiller,
yes.
Is the Diller complex a city park or an entertainment complex? That's a fun question.
So yeah, I don't think it's some kind of a public-private partnership. So I'm not exactly sure what the structure is and what the relationship is with NYC Parks. But and that's the thing that you find with most new parks today, is that they are not strictly city parks. They are some kind of public-private partnership. That includes,
Hudson River Park itself.
Hudson River Park, yep, as well as Brooklyn Bridge Park, even Bush Terminal Park further down in Brooklyn. That's sort of run by NYC Parks. It's also run by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. So, yeah, over the last 40 years, we've developed more innovative, or you could say convoluted, ways of funding our park system in New York City. for the last stretch here, I wanted to give people a little bit of a view of the New Jersey side. And as you referenced before, Stefan, we don't often talk a lot about the New Jersey waterfront and its history in New York, but this is a completely, basically a brand new skyline. You know, this skyline was all constructed within the last 35 years, and some of it much more recently than that. But this used to all be working waterfront here in Jersey City and Hoboken.
That's where On the Waterfront was filmed, and of course there were a lot of ocean liners that were moored there. In fact, a lot of the German ocean liners, you're talking about the seafarers who were held at Ellis Island at the start of World War I, and many of them were taken off of German ships in New Jersey right as word leaked out that America was entering the war.
I saw Amy here mention that she loves the AIA boat tours. So Classic Harbor Line runs those in partnership with AIA New York, and they're really, really fantastic. We've gotten to know a lot of the guides who do those tours and have gone on a lot of them ourselves. So they're really, really fantastic. I wanted to give people a little view of the Erie and Lackawanna rail terminal here.
Yeah, one of the few survivors. There were 5 major rail terminals in New Jersey that met with ferries to shuttle people to New York, and there's this one and the one we looked at in the photo and can see on the horizon from the Central Railroad of New Jersey. Those are the ones who've hung on.
And we can see all the ferry boats there as well. You know, the active ferry service across the Hudson River. It died off for many years, and then it came back in 1986 with New York Waterways. So other than the Staten Island ferry, this is the longest continuously operating ferry service in New York Harbor, because the NYC ferry, you know, that started as the East River ferry, which was revived in 2011, and for the last few years has been known as the NYC ferry system. But yeah, on the Hudson River, we've had it. The difference is that it's more of a east-west service. It's sort of a cross-river service, whereas the NYC ferry service is more serving along, not just going across, but all along the shoreline. Get another nice
one coming up the Hudson from Staten Island to Battery Park City, and then to Midtown.
Yep.
We're right at 3 o'clock here. We had a bunch of questions come in at the end. Questions about the history of Pavonia and history of and observations about cargo boats seeming to be more prevalent on the East River since the pandemic started, and questions about JFK's boat, the Honeyfits. So hopefully we'll address a lot of these in the upcoming programs.
Yeah, but I just wanted to point out one last thing here, which is Stevens Institute, which is right in front of us here. So the engineering school.
Mound, there's like a dark green mound with 3 skyscrapers on top, or 3 tall buildings on top of it, or seeming on top of it from this perspective.
Yeah, so this is the engineering school in Hoboken. And they actually used to have a dormitory on a boat, the SS Stevens, which was an old World War II cargo ship that they converted into a dormitory for a while, that was moored here in the Hudson River.
And of course, Stevens himself played an important role in the development of steam navigation, which we talked about in the previous program, and a couple times, in fact. But yeah, it's a great view, and glad to know that there are things happen in New Jersey that don't involve chemical explosions and munitions. That's a positive.
Again, another view here of Diller Island, but we're gonna be cruising around here for a few more minutes. But yeah, we're happy to answer any questions if we want to touch on a couple.
Sure.
If people want to stick around.
Yeah, so we had one question I don't know the answer to, but maybe you do. How familiar are you with JFK's boat, the Honeyfits? We had a viewer who says that they think that it was moored at Battery Park City for a while and looked similar to the boat that you're on.
That's a good question. I actually don't know much about it. I mean, what I know about JFK and his connection to New York is the fact that PT-109, the boat he commanded in World War II, was built over in Bayonne, New Jersey, at Elko a company called Elco, which made a lot of the PT boats. And that PT boat was commissioned, so accepted into service in the U.S. Navy over at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So there's a lot of connections. JFK also came to New York to dedicate the East Coast Memorial in Lower Manhattan in 1963. So a lot of connections, but I don't know specifically about the Honey Fist. That's something to look into. We're always interested in historic ships that used to be in New York, right? Like we have a lot of historic ships here today, but there are a lot that aren't around anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, we got a nice view again of the Pier 54 there. And what really strikes me about Pier 54 and also Little Island is that both of them are addressing the problems with pier structure and pier design. Pier 54 was built in the wake of a major pier fire on the Grace Lines pier that utterly destroyed the pier. And so the idea of they built it, I think we have a slide of the original pier design was quite radical, this concrete construction. There it is. And
Pier 57, you mean? Sorry.
So really radical construction with these concrete caissons. And a lot of the idea was to eliminate the risk of fire. And then we see the old piling structure in the park, which we also have a slide of that'll give you a little bit of a better image there.
So Stefan, just so you know, since we have this cruise actually goes until 3:30.
Oh goodness!
But we thought we have some extra time, so we're heading north. So if you could put on my camera.
Oh sure, yeah, you've got a great view there.
So we can see the Frying Pan, which is a light ship, and the John J. Harvey historic fireboat. There's a third historic vessel here as well, which is often overlooked.
and walked across, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
The barge itself, an old railroad barge. I believe that's a Lackawanna Railroad barge that they're moored to.
Yeah, so it was a barge that was used, like Stefan was mentioning, for lightering, for drive trains onto these barges with tracks on them and move them back and forth. And speaking of railroad infrastructure, behind it, we can see that building with sort of the brown stripes and the windows with those 3 water towers on top of it. That's the Sterrett
picture there. The center.
Yeah, the Sterrett Lehigh building, which was built to interface with the High Line. With that elevated freight rail line, and you could drive freight trains right into the building, and it even had elevators inside of it for moving freight cars onto different levels of the building. Now today it's creative office building, but sort of in the foreground of it, to the left of it, you can see an older style warehouse building that would have been typical of the waterfront.
Yeah, we could barely make out what that there, but something we should be able to, if you keep going at this speed for much longer, are you going to get to the Intrepid on this tour?
Yeah, we're definitely going to see the Intrepid.
All right.
Here we can see again Hudson Yards, and in the center of it, Vessel, not the vessel, but it's called Vessel. I like to call it the shawarma.
Yep,
because it looks like a giant spinning cone of meat. A friend of ours was quoted on WNYC when it opened, who called it the billionaire's jockstrap, which I thought was a pretty good name for it.
We're also, someone earlier mentioned the United States lines. If I'm not mistaken, we're passing the spot that was the moorage for the United States lines. Their piers were in this neck of the woods here by the Javits Center.
And so we're at Pier 76. And now you can see the Javits Center behind it, and we can see another of those ventilation shafts, this time for the Lincoln Tunnel. So yeah, I think what we'll do is we're probably going to get to about the Intrepid and then have to turn around. But thanks everybody who could stick around with us, and we just wanted to get to as many questions as we could. And this is a little bonus. We didn't expect we'd be able to go anywhere north of 23rd Street. But again, so here we are in Hell's Kitchen, which is a neighborhood that for a long time was synonymous with longshoremen and with shipping. Not so much anymore.
Yes, great views here. So, yeah, we're coming up on. Someone mentioned Circle Line right at the top of the show that they'd done a navigation around New York, but only with Circle Line. It's been in operation for a very long time, and some of their boats date back to before World War II, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Circle Line actually, they used to have their mooring or their dockage in the Brooklyn Navy Yard for a long time. They didn't depart from the Navy Yard; it's just where they kept their boats. But yeah, definitely a venerable part of the New York City sightseeing scene. But you can also do a navigation of Manhattan on board Classic Harbor Line. It's really fun. But here we see the Intrepid. So if you're not familiar with the Intrepid, if you haven't visited it, it's the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. This is a World War II era Essex-class aircraft carrier. Looks very different in its configuration than it would have during World War II. It underwent a number of modernizations, two of which were done at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. In fact, the last job ever done by the Brooklyn Navy Yard was the refit of the Intrepid back in 1965. So here we get
the thing that makes it look most different to me right now is that giant bulge on the bow there. What are we looking at?
We're actually looking at the stern, so we can see the
stern.
fantail there. Yeah, so underneath that is the Enterprise, the prototype space shuttle, which they got about 10 years ago. And then we can also see in the foreground the Concorde, one of the Concordes that's on display. We're hoping to do a program in the near future about the history of Concorde. But yeah, so the Intrepid, they really embrace their name as the Sea, Air, and Space Museum. So it's really about the STEM and science education. It's not just a historic ship, not just a military museum, but you can see some of the aircraft that are arrayed on its flight deck. But yeah, really, really great institution. So the Intrepid actually served until 1974, and then I guess about 8 years after it was retired is when it came to New York and the museum opened. Speaking of bygone historic ships, there used to be a number of other vessels. A lot of historic ships have sort of made their way through the Intrepid, have been sort of passed through the collections of the Intrepid at various times, including the USS Slater, which is a destroyer escort that's up in Albany. That was actually part of the collection here at the Intrepid, I believe, for a little while. So yeah, but here we are now up at Pier 90 and Pier 92.
The area we referred to at the top of the show where they cut into the island to make room for longer. This is also at Pier 92. This was one of the major terminals for the Erie Barge Canal. When they rebuilt the Erie Canal in 1917, they built terminals around the harbor for it, and one of them was located right there on the left. And
it's also where you can come. It's where they hold the what's called the what's the term for it? It's basically the preliminaries for the Westminster Dog Show are held over there. So it was something that we used to enjoy going to almost every year. We've never been to the big show in Madison Square Garden, but we love to go to the breed-specific competitions, and those are held over here.
I have to say there are so many great events that happen at that space that I had something else completely in mind, but I'm really thrilled to hear. I didn't know about the cool.
Yeah. It used to be, I think was it at Chelsea? It's been at different locations. They used to actually hold it inside like one of the other areas of Madison Square Garden, and then they moved it to the piers here a few years ago.
Before we get further, I do want to make sure, I know we got a couple people who are timing out with us here, but sure that we mention big thanks to Cindy and Amanda who are helping us back behind the scenes. And for those of you who logged on a little bit later, do make sure you check out our upcoming programs. Program tomorrow on Lunar New Year, Asian Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
And looking at some of how that's celebrated here in Flushing, Queens, but also traditions that we have our colleague Gina, who is from Wuhan, and will show us some of the traditions and more nautical and maritime oriented programs coming up in upcoming weeks. And are we still also, we're doing walking in person and in the park, aren't we?
That's right. Yeah. So if you want to join us for a walking tour of Prospect Park, we have one coming up on March 7th and then on March 21st. If the snow continues, maybe we'll do one of them on skis. I've been doing a lot of skiing in the park. But yeah, so thank you so much to everybody. And thank you, Stefan. This was a great conversation. And we lucked out. We got to see a little bit more than we thought we would. So thanks to everyone who was able to stick around for a little bit longer. If you missed any portion of this program, we'll also have a recording available. So you can email us and we're happy to share that with you. But a big thanks to our friends at Classic Harbor Line, especially the crew today, Sarah, Chris, and Todd. Such a beautiful boat, such a great crew, and we just love working with them. So it's a great way to explore the city and see the harbor. Yeah, I'm gonna go inside and maybe warm up, have a drink.
There you go. Thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate your braving the cold for us.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Well, take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Stay safe till then.